I'm Chris Smith, and I'm delighted to be able to talk to you today about crucial conversations in Agile teams. Or, if you like subtitles, how making it safe to talk about almost anything unlocks continuous improvement. So, who am I? Well, I'm head of product delivery at Redgater Software, and my job is to lead the software development teams that work on Redgate's ingeniously simple database software, building teams with clarity of purpose, freedom to act, and the drive to learn. I've been working in Agile teams since 2004. I've been working with humans to make software for over 20 years, and I've led teams or groups of teams for over 10 of those years. So, this session is inspired by a book I've found hugely useful in my role working with teams and humans. I'll be building on its lessons during other references from software delivery to human psychology and drawing on my experience of either making a mess of crucial conversations or watching other people make a mess of them too. We'll be exploring tools and techniques to help us understand what's happening in these situations, navigate them, and hopefully engage in open discussion to persuade and help each other improve. So here's the book. It's got quite the prosaic cover, hasn't it? It introduces a concept that I think we'll all recognise, although I doubt we'll have called them crucial conversations, unless we've read the book. So what is a crucial conversation? A crucial conversation, as defined by the book, is a discussion between two or more people where the stakes are high, opinions vary, and emotions run strong. The book itself gives us some really hefty examples of times when crucial conversations can pop up in our lives and where poor handling of them can really hold us back. For instance, they talk about ending relationship, asking a friend to repay a loan, dealing with a rebellious teen, asking in-laws to quit interfering, which is a thing that never happens, or especially it talks about conversations with people you will want to have an ongoing relationship with, including talking to someone you live with, perhaps a housemate, about their antisocial behaviour. It was those examples that remind me of a time when I first moved to Cambridge and shared a house with two pretty basically strangers who since then have gone on to become some of my closest friends. But our house sharing was not always harmonious. In fact, one of the housemates had a curious disregard for cleanliness or the feelings of his housemates. He once told me, in a moment of candour on a night out, "Chris, I've got to be honest with you. I knocked your toothbrush off the shelf and into the toilet. Right. And I picked it out and put it back in the jar. Great. And I did that 2 weeks ago. Right." So, as you can imagine, we ended up in a heated and not particularly constructive conversation about how that was not cool, or that I should chill out. It wasn't an isolated incident. An example of the kind of stuff he did was give our fellow housemate food poisoning with some ill-placed raw chicken in the fridge, and cultivating mushrooms in my bathroom carpet while I was on holiday for 2 weeks. But, short of a few angry exchanges, we never really seriously addressed his behaviour. He was a friend, and we had a good laugh in the house most of the time. So it was okay. But if we'd found a way to get through to him, to discuss this without shouting in a pub at him, we may have been able to persuade him that he could change his behaviour somewhat, and we'd all have a better time as a result. So, crucial conversations in teams. Do crucial conversations happen in teams? Well, of course they do. They're not often about toothbrushes, I have to admit. We invest heavily in our work. We care. We're passionate and we disagree. The stakes are high, or at least they seem high, because we're so invested in our work. And opinions vary. Wow, do they vary. And emotions run strong as a result of those things. Also, we work in teams for much of the time, in close proximity, virtually, if not physically at the moment. And that increases our likelihood of having crucial conversations. These things pop up all the time. Perhaps we're giving our boss some feedback about their behaviour, or approaching a colleague to critique their work, talking to a team member that isn't keeping to their commitments, giving an unfavourable performance review, receiving an unfavourable performance review, talking to a co-worker about a personal hygiene problem. A few examples that popped into my head. were me having to facilitate a meeting, a retrospective, where I prepared really well and I was really excited about how I was going to help the team to continuously improve after their last sprint. The team troop in, and then one member of the team, the Joker, calls out, "Oh great, another life-affirming meeting," as they sit down. They pull up their phone and start browsing the random cat gifs channel on Slack, clearly disengaging. And I'm annoyed. This person's being really rude, and I've prepared so much for this meeting, and I really believe that we can do some continuous improvement in the next hour. In fact, that person's behaviour is infecting the rest of the team as well. But what do? I want to shout at them, but that's not going to really help in this situation. And part of me wants to just ignore it and crack on and hope that it sorts itself out. But maybe that's not going to help him, and it's not going to help me. And another example, I remember quite clearly a stand-up with my team a few years ago, where one of the members had just told the rest of his colleagues that the refactoring task he'd been working on for a couple of days was harder than he'd expected, so it was going to take another day to complete. On the other side of the scrum, another team member visibly exhaled. And when it was his turn to talk, he said, "Well, if that refactoring track ever gets finished, then I'll start working on the front end. So I guess I'll be done sometime this century." He shrugs and looks over at the first team member pointedly. The rest of the stand-up was quite awkward, with everyone avoiding eye contact and trying to ignore what had just happened. The refactorer was doing a pastoral impression of Mount Vesuvius, and as soon as the meeting ended, he made a beeline for my desk to complain about his colleague. A few hours of meetings to sort that one out. But what should we have done? How should the first person have raised their concerns? Did they have reasonable concerns? Should they have just ignored it? We need to be able to better handle these crucial conversations. In the current world, when we are working remotely more than we used to, maybe the situation's better, right? Because we're not bumping into each other so much in meetings and stand-ups and retrospectives. But I think for many of us, we still are. We're just not in the same room physically. In fact, it's worse, because we're actually looking at the world through a letterbox now, and a number of our senses have been diminished. And then we have the issue of interpreting, or rather misinterpreting, written communication, where even the simplest exchange can be confusing. What did he mean by fine? Did he mean fine, or fine, or fine? So, I believe crucial conversations are important. They're sliding doors moments. Without Gwyneth Paltrow. When one happens and we find ourselves in that kind of situation, where there needs to be a conversation, but it's awkward, we're at a critical decision point, where the future veers off in one direction or the other. Do we avoid the conversation, and the train leaves without us, and we're still on the platform? Maybe we stumble quickly onto the wrong train, het up and frustrated and angry, and get stuck in the doors or end up in a really bad place. Or do we get on the right train, although it's difficult sometimes, and maybe the immediate future is a bit harder, but we end up in a better place? I might be stretching the metaphor a little bit there, but you get the idea. So, let's recap. What are our choices for handling crucial conversations? Well, we can avoid them, we can face them and handle them poorly, or we can face them and handle them well. Which of those is the best option? If we handle them poorly, what's the impact? I think we all know that instinctively. You maybe get poorer interpersonal relationships with our team members. Maybe we erode trust with each other. Maybe we make worse decisions because we're not talking about the things that matter. And if we're not talking about the things that matter, maybe we miss opportunities to learn and get better. Maybe we just start liking our work a bit less and want to move away, either within the organisation or outside. But if we handle these well, we might end up in Coolsville, having got on the right train. Yeah, I'm still stretching the metaphor, I'm really sorry. But what's the impact of handling these well? Well, by getting our thoughts out of our head and phrased and shared with the people we're having a conversation with in a constructive way, we're adding to a pool of shared meaning. It's like the thought bubble above the team's head, and we put our information into that shared team bubble so that we all see things from the same perspectives. It's like the parable of the blind men and the elephant in reverse, when the blind men grab hold of a different part of the elephant and all come away thinking they found a different thing. A snake, a rug, an arrow, a tree. If they share that information, perhaps they'll be able to work out really what was ahead of them and make some good decisions. Another reason we should handle conversations well is because it's key for agile software development. We inspect and adapt. We rely on a pool of shared meaning. We don't want people to hold things back or deliver information so it lands poorly or bounces off, nor do we want to react poorly because a user told us something we don't really want to hear. We're meant to do the best work we can in teams, so we need to share the best information and be able to have those conversations. Retrospectives are a good example of us trying to create a pool of shared meaning. The whole point is we get together and share each of our perspectives about the sprint or the project or the iteration to see what we did well, what we could improve, what ideas we have for next time. If we can facilitate a really good, open, safe and supportive environment, we'll get the best stuff out. Another reason that crucial conversations are so important is that high-performing teams are built on trust and healthy conflict. Patrick Lencioni, in his book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, talks about dysfunctional teams having an absence of trust or a fear of conflict, whereas highly functional teams are built on the opposite. And healthy conflict sounds like crucial conversations handled well to me. We want people to trust that they can ask for help or say what they really think. To be able to then able to have healthy conflict or passionate, unfiltered debate, as I think the book puts it. People should be able to tell each other stuff that could be hard to hear, because that'll help us come to the best answers and to improve. The importance of this kind of thing, of psychological safety and the resultant learning culture, is statistically proven in the book Accelerate by Forsgen, Humble and Kim. Now, this book is awesome, and it aims to measure software delivery performance and what drives it, using years of groundbreaking research and rigorous statistical methods. It proves culture is of huge importance to software delivery performance and actually of organizational performance. It says a climate for learning is predictive of performance gains. The book concludes the work of Ron Westrom, a sociologist who identified pathological, bureaucratic, and generative cultures in his work. Now, generative culture is the one we want to aim for, the one that the book and the science behind it, the statistics behind it, proves is the most predictive of organizational performance. And that talks about, on the right side of that table, that risks should be shared, failure should lead to inquiry, messengers should be trained. And again, that sounds like people being able to deliver difficult opinions is to have challenging conversations well in order to come to the right outcome, the best decisions, and to improve. Well, I think I've really rammed that home now. Crucial conversations are really important. And while they're really important, I haven't always handled them well. But this book, and some others that I've stumbled across, have helped me realise that I could do better in those situations, and they've given me some tools to apply in order to do that. And I'm going to share a few of those as we move through the rest of this talk. So, why do we avoid crucial conversations or handle them poorly? Remember, those are the two bad options from our three options earlier on about how to handle them. Which takes me to an example of me and pretty much everyone else involved really stuffing up a crucial conversation. So, a few years ago now, I was leading a team and my team was working with somebody remotely. One person that wasn't quite in the team who was working with us, and his goal was to speed up the product while the rest of the team worked on their normal backlog. And let's leave aside the idea that having some random person delve into the innards of your product while you're changing the rest of it. I mean, that's obviously a bad idea, but we were doing it. And this conference call was about this remote person telling the team what his plans were for speeding up the product. So we had a meeting for about 20 minutes. The chap carefully and dutifully explained exactly what he planned to do to the product, what his idea was to improve it. I didn't really understand the details. I was quite a long way from the code at that point. But the team listened carefully, not saying many words, asking the odd question. And at the end of it, we all sat there waiting for what should happen next. Asked the team, so, are we going to do this then? Are we okay with this? I looked around, saw mostly blank faces, but little nod. These folks were clearly heavily committed to this idea. And so we said, great, we'll move on. Start doing that for us, thank you. And we ended the call. Now, as soon as I clicked the button, which I think was Skype, close, the room erupted. Oh, that's a terrible idea. Oh, it's just making a copy of half the code. What are we doing that for? Unbelievable. The team really hated the idea and just decided not to mention it in that entire meeting that was all about them giving their opinion on the idea. And I went, and I think the technical term here is apeshit. Why on earth hadn't they said anything? Why hadn't they raised their opinion when we were actually in the meeting with the guy that was talking about it? Why had they let me down? Why had they betrayed me? Now, obviously, this chap that was suggesting the idea was well known for being somewhat argumentative and maybe not listening to reasons sometimes. And the team had picked up on that and decided, you know what? I wasn't going to get into that argument. It was going to be too difficult. So they avoided it. And obviously, rather than raising the point sort of constructively, that actually maybe it would have been better if we'd have handled that more maturely and had the discussion. Instead, I freaked out, which probably didn't help. So what's going on there? What happens when we avoid conversations or handle them poorly like that? Well, we're reacting physically because biology, it's how we're made. When safety is threatened, we can feel that safety is threatened because we've been let down by our colleagues or because we didn't want to have a fight with somebody, even if that's verbally, we move to silence or violence. And that's kind of flight or fight. And when we're in that situation, we act in self-defeating ways. We do silly things, which can make things worse. But why? Well, at this point, if I'd given you a previous iteration of this talk, I'd have tried to explain to you how the brain works. I'd have talked about the amygdala and amygdala hijack and the frontal lobe and all this kind of stuff. And I wouldn't have done a very good job. And after one of those sessions, a colleague said to me, "Have you read the book, The Chimp Paradox?" And I hadn't. So he threw a copy at me. And I think it's brilliant. So, The Chimp Paradox is a book written by Professor Stephen Peters. He's a psychiatrist. You may have heard of him. He's famous for helping elite sports personalities like Ronnie O'Sullivan, Sir Chris Hoy, the British cycling team, the Liverpool football team, helping them achieve their ambitions and do great things. He's also worked with the English football team. But you can't win them all. Anyway, the Chimp Paradox introduces a model, the Chimp Model. And the idea with that is it will help you understand and manage your mind. It kind of makes brain science easy to understand. Now, obviously, as we know, all models are wrong, but some are useful, and I really think this model is useful to help me understand what's going on when I'm in difficult situations, when in crucial conversations, and helps me work out what I should do. So let me try and explain it to you. Here's the Chimp Model. Now, the Chimp Model suggests that we have three independent brains within our brain. I know, it sounds weird, but it really helps you understand what's going on. So the first brain is the human, and that is associated with logical thinking. It works with facts and truths. It's your conscious you, and it's mainly based in the frontal lobe. The chimp is your second brain, and it's an emotional thinking machine. It works with feelings and impressions. It acts without your permission, and it's faster at thinking than the human, 5 times faster. It's mainly based in the limbic system. And again, the human and the chimp are independent brains, independent personalities with different agendas, and they can sometimes act in conflict as well as in concert. The third brain is the computer, which is a storage area for programmed thoughts and behaviors. Again, it's fast, it's 20 times faster than the human, and it's used to act in an automatic way, things you don't need to think about to do. It also serves as a reference point, so the human and the chimp put information in to the computer and take it out and react on that. Now, we've seen this model in action, I'm sure, all of us, but I've seen it in one of the bleakest habitats in the world, the road maintenance purgatory that is the A14, A428 roadworks in north of Cambridge. So I have to commute this way. I had to commute this way every day when I was commuting and not sat at home all the time. And these roadworks have been going on for approximately 100 years. Now, I was trying to use this time constructively by actually listening to the Chimp Paradox in an audiobook as I commuted to work. And a very short journey, well, it should have been a short journey, was taking 40 minutes. So I got through a lot of the book. And as I was listening to the Chimp Paradox, I was stuck in the left-hand side of the lane as the lane was narrowing, as 2 lanes were narrowing to 1. And I was dutifully staying in the left-hand side of the right lane, as all good road users should do, leaving the right lane empty because it was soon going to be closed. Now, as you know, some people think that they're more important than the rest of us and go in the empty lane on the right-hand side in order to cut off a huge queue and nip in at the end before the lane is closed. These people are evil. Apologies if you're one of those people. Obviously you're not evil. I'm sitting here and I'm listening to the Chimp Paradox, and I'm aware over my right shoulder that a shining knight of honour and virtue has done the thing that we all wish we were brave enough to do when we're stuck in the left-hand lane. He's pulled out into the right lane and stopped to stop all those other people zooming past to cut us up as the lane closes further ahead. So he's a rolling roadblock, keeping pace with the inside lane to stop people cutting the line. I then become aware that behind that, and it's actually a 1 Series BMW, quite a small car, was a white van that was parked approximately 0.5 millimetre away from his back bumper, flashing his lights. Ooh, conflict. I feel a little bit nervous about this. I don't like conflict, and I could see that this was a situation was probably annoying both parties in the cars. I went back to my book. A couple of seconds later, I was aware that the BMW was now next to me. It had accelerated away from the white van and parked right next to me, again keeping track with the inside lane. But moments later, the white van was there behind it, again resting his front bumper on the rear bumper of the BMW and flashing his lights. The chap inside really annoyed. Then the white van door opened and out stepped a humongously large man who started to walk towards the BMW. I was feeling quite nervous now. I wasn't even involved, but I was near them, listening to the Chimp Paradox. And just as the white van man approached the BMW's front door, the BMW driver wound down his window, slowly accelerated away, stuck his hand out, and flipped the white van the bird. And then he disappeared off into the horizon. Again, in the should-be closing lane, the white van man jumped back into his van and chased after the BMW driver. And I was there, listening to the Chimp Paradox. Now, what's going on? These people have driving license. They've probably got mortgages. They've got kids that look up to them. They've got jobs they hold down. Why are they acting like children and trying to fight on a road because somebody's in someone else's way, or somebody is daring to try and go to work quicker than they are? What's going on there? Well, it's the chimp. It's the chimp that's telling you that that's not fair, or the chimp that's saying that somebody shouldn't be able to stop me going where I'm going. It's you acting instinctively, and that chimp offering up to you in emotion, saying, hey, do you want to get angry at this? Here's some adrenaline. And you saying, yes, I do. It's not fair. I'm going to stop them, or I'm going to smash him because I want to get to work. It's the chimp that's taking over those people. These people are normal humans that can do really rational, nice things. But on this road, on that day, they were reacting emotionally. But the chimp isn't always bad. It can be your best friend as well as your worst enemy, hence the Chimp Paradox. I'm sure you've been in a situation like I have, where you've kind of been maybe reading a book, listening to Chimp Paradox, and it's been slightly overcast, and it's been a little bit drizzly, and your mind's just wandered away from the road, and then all of a sudden you realise you've braked, and you've stopped without knowing why, and you look up and you realise that your peripheral vision has seen the red lights of cars all around you jamming brakes on, and you've just hit the brakes without knowing it. And that was the chimp as well. The chimp seeing some information quicker than you were, asking the computer what you should do about it if you see red lights all of a sudden. The computer saying, yep, that's bad, you should brake. And you braking even before your conscious you has realised. So the chimp's not all bad. So let's reassess where we are. The chimp, it's an emotional thinking machine. Everyone has an inner chimp that thinks independently and can hijack you. Its aim is survival, so it's vigilant and paranoid. It can really overreact and interpret things unreasonably as threatening, like public speaking. Their features include fight, flight, and freeze, and they're like injecting you with adrenaline. And this is really important. The chimp isn't good or bad, it's just a chimp. You really shouldn't beat yourself up if you react like this. It's how you're made. But that's not to mean that you're let off really lightly. It's kind of like having a dog. You're not responsible for the nature of your dog, but you are responsible for managing it and keeping it well behaved. So you're not responsible for the attitude of your chimp, but you are responsible for managing it and for working with it. And then there's the human, which you can think of as your conscious you. The human is a rational thinking machine. It interprets information by searching for facts and establishing truth. Its aims vary, but really, it often wants to live in peace and harmony with those around it. Its features can include honesty, compassion, and self-control, features not available to the chimp. And at work, we really want the human in charge. So, we want to manage our chimp and give control to the human. We're going to use facts, truths, and knowledge to help us manage that chimp that we all have, and give control to the human who will think logically and rationally and solve problems, hopefully deciding what to do. Now, your human may try to take back control from the chimp, but the chimp is much stronger and quicker than you. So it's going to be tough sometimes, and we have to cut ourselves some slack if a few moments after we realise the chimp has taken control and made us act in a way we wouldn't really choose to, or the human wouldn't choose to. We've got to accept that and move on and try to put tools in place so that we can improve next time. I think one of those tools, one of the sets of tools, is found in the Crucial Conversations book. I really like this framing of the problem we're trying to solve here, is that we're aiming not just to react. We're aiming to work in the space between an action and reaction. And there's a lovely quote from a chap called Viktor Frankl, who's a neurologist who was a neurologist and psychiatrist and thought deeply about the human search for meaning. And he said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies growth and our freedom. So let's learn to respond if we can and not react. So, okay, what do we do when conversations turn crucial? Here's 5 things I think you should have a go at. So, we're in a crucial conversation, emotions are running strong, stakes are high, and opinions are varying. And this might be about, an incident with your toothbrush, perhaps something that's happened on the roads, in a collaborative meeting, or at a stand-up. Whenever these have happened, what can you do? In all these situations, whether you are in a situation with your housemates or another driver of your team or the disgruntled colleague, the first thing you need to do is focus on yourself. The only person you can directly control is yourself. Now, there may be an overwhelming desire to fix the person that's annoyed you or caused an emotion, but you have to accept that you cannot control them. And your chimp will be desperate to do this, to have dominion over them. But then also their chimp does not want you to control them or tell them what to do. Maybe this is what happened where the driver of the white van felt upset that they couldn't do what they wanted, that somebody was trying to control them and stop them from doing what they had just decided they wanted to do. So when we enter a crucial conversation, we have to think that it's not our behaviour that degenerates, it's our motives, or rather our chimp's motives take center stage. We might want to punish somebody, have dominion, fight to survive. So we have to look at ourselves to change and to act differently in order to help improve the crucial conversation and avoid this trap. One technique to prevent your chimp hijacking you and to stop you acting rashly is to force it to wait before you take action. There's a fair bit of research that states that you just need to wait 6 seconds for the chemicals that the chimp has dumped into your system to diffuse away, to allow your time to maybe make a better decision. It might actually be better that you step away from the situation completely, make your excuses, decide what you're going to say, and then come back to have the conversation in the right frame of mind. Professor Peters recommends exercising the chimp. What he means by that is you take yourself away into probably a room with a door, maybe with a friend there who knows their role is just to listen to you, and letting the chimp vent. So that is shouting, explaining what the problem is, just freaking out, to let it get out of its system and to get tired, which should allow the human to step in and give it some more rational reasoning and maybe make a plan for how you're going to progress the situation. The third thing you can do is to not make a false choice. And by false choice, I mean choosing between honesty and keeping a friend. This is where you find yourself in a difficult situation and you might be tempted to lie or to be quiet in order to not upset somebody that you'd like to continue to work with or to be friends with. We've learned this as children. We've been taught that actually when someone asks you something that makes them vulnerable and might be misinterpreted as a criticism of themselves, that you're better to lie. For instance, maybe when you were a kid, your gran made you a great casserole, something that she was really proud of. And she gave it to you and waited as you took the first spoonful. And she said, "Do you like it?" And you went, "Ugh, no, it's horrible." And her face drops. And that's because when she said, "Do you like it?" she actually meant, "Do you like me?" And you said, "No." So as kids, we take that information, we lock it away in our computer for the chimp to refer to later on, knowing that if I tell them this thing, they will be upset. They will hate me. They may even hurt me, and they won't want to be my friend anymore. So let's try and fight that reaction. Instead of just keeping quiet or lying, ask yourself, how can I be 100% honest and 100% respectful of this person? For example, how could I have a candid conversation with my team about the delayed work and avoid creating bad feelings? Is there a way? I suspect if you ask yourself that question, you'll be able to come up with a good answer. The fourth thing we need to do is separate facts from stories. Now, this diagram will help describe how we decide what we're going to do when something happens to us. So the first thing that might happen to us is that we see or hear something. We see someone act, we hear someone say something. And then, even though we might not be conscious of this, we tell ourselves a story. Perhaps behind the motivations for what that person did or said, what they did or said. And that story might make us feel something. Maybe anger, maybe frustration, maybe fear. And then we might act. So, this is at least what the human would like to do. They'd like to look at facts and truths and then reach a reasonable conclusion based on those, and then decide how to act. But interestingly, the chimp actually bases actions on instincts and emotions, actually then invents a story to support the facts, and then acts. And it does that very quickly. We've got to be very aware of three clever little stories we tell ourselves when something happens. Sometimes this is because of the way we've interpreted the facts. Sometimes it's because it's a natural instinct of the chimp. So one of the stories could be it's a villain story. This is around where seeing the antagonist, it's all their fault. Somebody has done something deliberately bad or evil, and we overemphasize that. Then there's a victim story where we say, it's not my fault. We exaggerate our own innocence. I couldn't have done anything that contributed to this problem. This is all about them. And then there's a helpless story. Well, there's nothing else I could do. Perhaps I won't raise this with the boss because he wouldn't listen to me anyway, and everything would be the same. Or I won't tell this person that I think their technical idea is a bad one, because we'd have a big argument, he'd hate me a bit more, and do the same thing anyway. So what's the point? Often these stories are easier to spot in others than it is to spotting yourself. I remember meeting with a colleague of mine who was telling me about how one of their teammates really didn't value their time and thought they were worthless. I said, how did they know that? Well, it turns out that they'd been working with this colleague on a presentation, and my friend had booked several meetings to get together with this person to talk about the presentation and prepare it together, and they'd missed all the meetings and turned up late to one of them, barely even offering an apology. And from there, she'd moved on to think, well, he must think my time isn't worth even apologising about. He mustn't even think I'm worthwhile. He doesn't even want my input on this. Which isn't exactly what was said, but a story that's been created. And is it true? Is that person so Machiavellian that they'd do this to her? Well, evil people do exist, but it's not as common as you'd think. What you need to do in these situations is challenge your own story. Ask yourself, why might a reasonable, rational, and decent person do that thing? A good thing to try is to replace the person doing the thing with an image of your best friend. It's somebody you really, really like. If they were to do exactly the same things that that person did, would you feel the same way? Would you give them the benefit of the doubt? If you would, then it might be time to reevaluate whether you've created a narrative and what the actual facts of the situation are. Because you don't really know what's going on with the other person. The fifth thing to do when you're in this situation and you challenge your story is to work out what you really want from this conversation and from the situation. What do you want for you? What do you want for them? And what do you want for the team or the wider relationship or in the longer term? When you've come to a conclusion on those three things, say, okay, well, if I really want those things, what would I do? How would I act? Back to my example, reviewing this third party's idea of what we should do to our product. What did I really want from that conversation? Well, for me, I think I wanted to remain calm and keep to the principles as a leader, which was to listen and help the team make the best decision they can. For them, I wanted them to help us decide what the right thing to do is, to really engage in the problem and free them up to be honest. And for the team in the longer term, well, I wanted this to be a psychological safe environment where people have the trust to say what they think. Now, if I really wanted those things, would I have freaked out at the end of that call? Probably not. Right, so there's a crucial conversation happening. How do you actually structure that? Well, what we're encouraging you to do here is step forward and into dialogue. Not to run away, not to stay quiet, not to attack, to be sarcastic, to be cynical, or to just go for the jugular. Instead, we want to step into the conversation. It's to create that shared thought bubble above all our heads. So, we've talked about the 5 things we would do when stepping forward. And we're going to use those steps as we look to choose a path that increases the likelihood of us handling a crucial conversation well. This is a tool from the book, State Your Path. And what it's doing here is it's trying to explain in the clearest, persuasive way about your opinion and leaving it open for the antagonist to share what they think. The first thing you should do is share your facts, just the facts, not the narrative. So perhaps you can say, this task has been sat there in the doing column on the task board for 2 days. That's a fact. Or you didn't turn up to those meetings that we booked last week. That's a fact. And then you can tell your story, framing it as a story. Now, framing your story and being honest about what you think is scary, but you kind of have to do it. If it's a reasonable conclusion to draw, and hopefully you've assessed that, then you should be able to tell it. Seems to me you don't really value our time together. Seems to me that you might be struggling with that task and you need some help. And then ask for others' paths. Is that right? How do you feel? How do you see it? Do you need help? That should really make it easier for the other person to suggest if you've got it wrong, or to agree with you if you've got it right, or somewhere between. While you're doing this, you should also think about these 2 things. You should talk tentatively. Avoid absolutes. Separate stories from facts. Always leave open the door that you could be wrong. I'll talk about that again in a minute. And finally, encourage testing. Use your coaching skills here to be curious, to invite opposing views, to really explore what the other person's thinking and feeling. I suspect that's really going to help us come to a good conclusion with these crucial conversations. So talk tentatively. This is really just about choosing your words carefully, and this is even more important as many of us are working remotely and communicating through Slack or email, other textual formats. Words can have really strong connotations. But in the jungle, chimps attack with teeth, claws and fists, and as people, we often do it with words. And also words can be misinterpreted. What you should really try and do is to avoid absolutes, to show that you're open to other views and choose those words carefully. Something as simple as switching up from the fact is to, in my opinion, rather than it's clear to me, use something like, I'm beginning to wonder if. I wonder if. Leaving it open that you could be wrong. And easier for them to share their opinion without feeling attacked and without the chimp reacting. Something as simple as rather than you should have done this, is you could have done that. There was an option. That might be enough just to soften the blow. But it's important to know here that you're still telling the truth. You're staying true to what you want to say and for what you want for them and for you. But you're making sure that you're not stating something as a fact if it really isn't. There are lots of other tools available to use here. I can't talk about all of them, and they're not really, so scary as these ones. One I've come across that I think is really good is something called Radical Candor from the book Radical Candor by Kim Scott, who's a senior manager and leadership lecturer at Apple and Google. What she says is the key point when having difficult conversations is to care personally and challenge directly, to do both of those things. That's that balance between being 100% honest, but also respectful. So you're coming from a good place when you're presenting this information. It's not an attack. She uses this axis of caring personally against challenging directly to talk about what happens if somebody's got their fly down. So if you care personally and challenge directly, you're not going to shy away from that. You're going to say, hey, your fly is down. Yeah, it might hurt a little bit, but you're doing it because you're trying to protect them. If you challenge directly but didn't really care about them, you might shout it out so everyone can hear. Look, his fly is down. Not cool. Often what we fall into, especially with something like this, is ruinous empathy, which is caring personally but not wanting to challenge directly, so you just leave it. So that person wanders around with their fly down for the rest of the day. Another tool you may well be familiar with is active listening. This is going to be really important as you explore what's going on with your colleagues around this crucial conversation. Asking questions. Is this what you meant? Did I understand you correctly? Mirroring. You say that you're okay with this, but you look upset. Paraphrasing things to make sure they understand that you've got their perspective. Let's see if we got this right. Is this what you meant? And prime. It's that idea of throwing the doors open for them so you can listen to what their perspective is. Okay, so let's recap what I talked about today. Firstly, I talked about how crucial conversations are really important, both at home, but also at work and in our agile teams. And the crucial conversations are sliding doors moments where we have the opportunity to choose the path ahead of us. We might avoid the conversation and the train leaves without us. We might stumble on the wrong train hastily, get stuck in the doors, cause an argument. Or we might prepare well, get up on the right train, and perhaps learn something on the journey and end up in a better place. I talked about how agile teams make decisions and improve based on the latest information. And if people are holding back information because they're not well equipped to have crucial conversations in a psychologically safe environment, then we're not really going to be doing the best work that we can. I've also tried to explain a little bit of why we handle crucial conversations poorly sometimes. And I've introduced you to the three brains inside our brain: the human, the chimp, and the computer. And I think they're really important. I talked about 5 things to do when conversations turn crucial: focusing on yourself, giving yourself some time to think, don't make a false choice, be careful to separate facts from stories, and work out what you really want, and then decide what you would do if that was true. I talked a little bit about how you might structure a crucial conversation, the key points to step forward and get into dialogue, and then a tool around stating your path, sharing your facts, telling your story, asking for others' paths, talking tentatively, and encouraging testing. And there's lots of other tools available, and I talked about radical candor and active listening, but you can find your own. So equipped with that stuff, hopefully the next time your housemate fesses up to potentially poisoning you 2 weeks ago, or your team don't do what you really expected them to do during a meeting, or you feel someone takes a big old swipe at you at stand-up, hopefully you'll still be able to step forward, get into dialogue, and have a really good, crucial conversation. Here's some books that I referred to during the session. I recommend them all. And that's it from me. So thank you very much for listening. And if you'd like to talk to me, I am available on Twitter there, or please feel free to email me. Thanks again, and take care.